In this video, I'm going to talk about what it's like to ride the Niner Rip 9 RDO in the high position, so the flip chip in the high position, and then put it in the low position and talk about the difference. So yesterday I went out for about a 2.5 hour ride in the mountains with the bike in the high position. Really loved the agility of the bike. It was snappy. It was not too unstable on the descents. It was great on the climbs, of course. But what I'm going to do now is go ahead and flip it. I'll show real quick how to do it. This won't really be a tutorial on how to do it. And then I'll pick up the video riding. So this will be a ride along video, and we'll just talk about what it's like to ride this bike in the low position versus the high. So there are two chips on the Niner Rip 9, one on each side. And you can see right now the H is up, which means it's in the high position. So I'm just going to unthread this bolt, and there's a small little bolt here, and we'll just pull that off, flip the chip around, and put it back on. So I removed those little screws there, and they hold the plates together. So you've got a plate on the inside and the plate on the outside. So you have to remove this bolt with an 8mm wrench, and then flip the plate on the inside and then flip the plate on the outside. I would say that takes about 10 to 15 minutes. You definitely want to get the rear wheel off before you do it. And then use an individual 2mm Allen wrench for those little ones inside to hold the plates together. I did it with a multi-tool because it's all I had, and it took forever because I had to do just teeny little turns at a time. So individual 2mm would be a lot easier just to be able to spin it. I'm ready to go ride, and I'll tell you what it's like to ride this bike in the low versus the high position. We are starting our climb. I'm riding Stanley Gap today, and this will test you for the climbs. I just finished a section that was close to 20%. That section that I just did was probably the steepest I'll do all day. And the front end, you could feel it, you know, lighter and wandering around a tiny bit more than in the high position, but wasn't really that noticeable. So far so good. I think the payoff on the downhills will be worth it for sure. So I did have a section back there where the front end wandered around too much and I had to dab. So I would say the two main disadvantages of running any bike with a flip chip in the lower position is a lighter front end on the climb, so it wanders around, harder to control, and then pedal strikes. I just had one very minor one on a root back there, so I'll be paying attention to that. But other than that, I mean, you gain the advantage of a more stable bike on these downhills. So I can definitely feel that the front end is more stable in this slacker position, which is good because this trail has some pretty chunky sections on it. Probably hard to see on the GoPro, but some pretty good rocks on it. Lots of roots. Yeah, it's a little more deliberate steering. It's not quite as telepathic as steering with it in the higher position. Oh man, it's raining. Darn it. Gotta get down before it starts pouring. It's beautiful and sunny this morning. It's amazing how fast the weather can change in the mountains. This bike still feels pretty agile. It doesn't have a really long wheelbase, so even slacking it out a little bit, it's still agile but stable. Back to climbing. I just went over a pretty big root garden back there and did not have a pedal strike, so pedal strikes are not really much of an issue on this bike in the low position, which is great news because I can't stand pedal strikes. Sometimes they scare the crap out of you. Well, here's another good application for the bike in the slacker setting is this rain is getting harder and harder, and I'm about to have a steep downhill on rocky, rooty terrain, and I need a bike that's going to be as stable as possible. I actually am having a hard time deciding because I've had 2 or 3 times where I've had to dab my foot where I don't think I would have in the higher setting. Just, you know, your bike hits, your front tire hits something and kind of goes one direction and just sends you off your line. So yeah, I mean, it's a hard choice. I know for this downhill, I'll be glad for the slacker setting. But, oh, this is a bummer. That fun steep section is going to be wet. Oh, the trail is a river. Man. You gotta be kidding me. Oh, this is lovely. Let's get down this rocky section. In the low position. Well, this is a little sketchy, as I expected. Careful of these diagonal roots. And there's lots of them. Starting to pour again. It is time to get back to the car. Back at the cabin, and I want to share my thoughts on running this bike in the high and the low position. That was one of those rides where it took almost as long to clean up as it did to do the ride. We had to cut it short because the trail was just not in condition to ride. The rain was just not stopping. So I think where I settled, and as you could tell during the video, I was really going back and forth on whether or not I would run it in the high or the low on trails like that. And I think I settled on the low position for a few reasons. One is pedal strikes were not that big of a deal. This bike does not have a super low bottom bracket. The cranks are 170s, which most trail and enduro bikes today are going with the shorter crank arms, which is a really good move. So pedal strikes, I did have some, but they weren't that big of a deal. Also, the bike, it definitely was harder to control on the climbs. I had times where the bike would just go off its line, and sometimes I could bring it back. Sometimes I had to put my foot down, which I hate putting my foot down on a climb, but I mean, it was really steep. Now, 14 to 18% with rocks and roots, it's going to be hard to control the bike no matter what position it is, but it just is a bit harder in the low position. It's a trade-off though, because on the downhills, I really preferred that lower position, especially since this bike does not have a really long front center, and essentially that's the contact patch of the front tire to the bottom bracket. And I've had other bikes like the Transition Sentinel, even the Specialized Stump Jumper that I had a longer front center. So that makes this bike more agile, more playful, not quite as stable as a longer front center. And so slackening the bike out, putting it in the low position really balances it out and makes it a really nice all-around riding bike. The only time I would really put it in the high position is just on smoother trails where they're tight corners, smoother trails. You don't really need a slacker bike, then the high position is going to be more beneficial. But on trails like I did today, especially when it's raining and I'm descending a rocky, rooty descent and pouring down rain, a slacker bike is the way to go. And I had some instances where the front tire hit a rock or root and almost slipped out. And would I have gone down with it in the high position? I don't know, but it's nice to have that slacker head angle on those kind of situations. Again, 65 is not that slack, right? So I think the low position is probably where I'd run it most of the time, unless the trail was super smooth. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. Let me know your thoughts if you've run a bike in the high or the low position. What are your preferred settings? What type of trails do you ride? Let us know. We'd love to hear your feedback. That'll do it for this video. Thanks for watching.